Hello friends, welcome to Universe of Narutox. If you love Naruto What If stories and anime explanations, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Now let's begin today's story. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. That was the sound of a golden blur seemingly teleporting back and down the path. Except that would be a gross misunderstanding because if the blur was in fact teleporting, you wouldn't be able to hear the sound of it shooting past. So, it is logical to assume that this strange blur was in fact simply running back and forth at such an incredible speed that it only seemed that it was teleporting. So, the speed that this blur must have been traveling at was faster than anything that had ever been discovered within the world, that is the elemental nations. By this point, the blur had now ran the distance of the Onum path an uncountable amount of times, as the noise of the blur passing by was occurring every 2 seconds. Essentially, this blur could run 2 miles in 2 seconds, which would then mean that the blur was able to travel 1 mile per second, the fastest distance traveled without the use of jutsu. However, this blur could not care in the slightest about this fact. From the looks of it, the only thing that this blur cared for was simply being fast. The path that the blur was using as its track was simply a line within the dirt that had been trodden upon so much that it had actually become a pathway within the dirt. Fun fact, nothing else has ever stepped on this same path. And if this was to be believed, then the blur on this path has run back and forth so many times that it had beaten the dirt further into the ground and had made an actual path. But the question always remained, what in the world was that blur? And why was it running back and forth down the same stretch of dirt path? Both of these questions can be answered rather simply by the blur itself. Swoosh. Not fast enough. Swoosh. Still not fast enough. Swoosh. Still not fast enough. Swoosh. Come on. I need to be faster. Swoosh. Faster. Swoosh. Faster. Swoosh. Faster. Swoosh. There. Suddenly, the blur stopped in its track without having to slow its momentum. And this revealed the blur to be a young man covered in what looked like golden fire, which made the already spiky hair even spikier than what it really was. The golden fire also created an almost cloak-shaped figure around the young man, which blew within the non-existent wind. Upon this golden fire-like coat was an assortment of black stripes in a stylish pattern. And on the upper back of the man's golden coat was a black stylized whirlpool-like shape which was circled by the black stripes that run along the coat. As soon as the man stopped, he went through so many hand seals in a mere matter of seconds that no one would be able to count exactly how many he used. The man finished his last seal and ended on a dragon variant hand seal in which a mass amount of energy practically exploded from within the young man. Harnessing the power, the exponential amount of energy that the man had gathered through all of the kinetic energy he gained from the constant running plus as much chakra as the man could expel formed together to create a dome of pure golden energy around the man. The energy gathered started to close in and decrease in size, encasing the man in an even smaller dome than before. The last thoughts that the man had were as follows. My friends, this time I will save you all, no matter the cost. That is the promise of a lifetime. The dome collapsed on itself, and the result was a huge explosion which created a crater that expanded at least 10 miles, leveling anything that was in path of it. And in the middle of the crater, where you'd expect a body to be, was surprisingly empty. Not even a speck of ripped clothing was left of what used to be a young man. To anyone else, it would seem that the man was completely vaporized. But that couldn't have been further from the truth. Because in fact, the man hadn't killed himself. No, the man had single-handedly erased his entire existence from reality. No information on the man was left in that world. For how could information about the man exist when there was no man in the first place? However, to say that erasing oneself from reality and dying are the same thing, they are surprisingly completely different meanings. Being killed or dying meant that you existed within the universe to die in the first place. Whilst erasing yourself from the universe meant that you never existed in the first place. However, erasing someone in one universe doesn't mean that that man might not suddenly appear within another universe. This is a story of a man who would risk his entire existence to save his friends, and he succeeded. In another universe, the spot where the man had erased his existence wasn't a crater with no life for miles. In this universe, the location was a luxurious forest landscape that stretched on for miles upon miles, filled to burst with animals of all nature. However, something changed within this forest. The universe had to rebuild itself due to a rather surprising occurrence. An occurrence that was thought impossible and ludicrous in itself to attempt had just happened. From high in the sky, a tear in the fabric of space and time opened, and for a tense second, nothing happened. The universe simply stopped occurring for a second until suddenly a body fell from the tear. A very familiar body fell. However, there were some stark changes from before. But there was no time to assess what these new changes were, as the body realized that it was quickly falling to its untimely death. Or you'd think it had be. But no, the body simply vanished from the air and appeared perched upon one of the many tree branches that were permeating the forest. The body shuddered slightly before it stood up straight and cheered for its heart's delight. Yes, it worked. The shout was certainly loud, but it informed the shouter of something rather important. What the hell? Why am I 16 again? The now teen exclaimed as he checked himself over, and in doing so, he realized another massive difference. Why am I still in tail beast mode? I can't seem to revert to my basic form. The teen was now thoroughly confused. During his many theoretical thoughts, he had never come across the chance that his body would revert to a younger age and that his form at the time of the process would then become his permanent form. But something was wrong with his tailed beast mode. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't sense any form of Buju chakra. None at all. It was as if the tailed beast form that he was currently in was nothing more than a cosmetic new feature. But that means the teen adopted a concentrated look. And after a few minutes, the teen sighed as a forlorn look appeared on his face. Kurama, you're gone. Just another friend I have to save. The teen stood there perched on the tree for a while, contemplating his next move. Due to the fact that his age had changed and his physical looks had certainly changed, he was going to have to make a few stories up as to who he was. Okay, the tailed beast mode can be easily covered up as a strange form of Keek Jank which affected from birth. And since there is no Bujiu chakra coming from this form, that story can actually work. My age, I can just say that my parents died when I was younger during a bandit raid on a small village that was wiped from the map. I'll change my name to Naruto. Naruto Kurama. A bit lazy, but it should work. With his thoughts sorted, the team decided to head in the direction of where Konoha would be located, but stopped when he realized that something was attached to his forehead. Reaching up, he felt the warm sensation of the golden chakra coat as he untied his headband. Turning it around in his hand so he could see it clearly. The teen simply stared at the simply piece of metal which embodied everything he ever was. Sighing deeply, Naruto grasped the piece of metal firmly in his arm back and then he threw it with everything he had and was pleased to see it shoot up like a comet and also sad because it meant that he was no longer Naruto Uzumaki or Naruto Namikaze. No, now he was Naruto Kurama in dedication to the only person who stuck with him through it all. I will save everyone this time. Nothing will stop me. With that thought, Naruto shot off like a bullet towards Konoha going as fast as this new body could, which was at least half as slow as he was in his universe. This annoyed Nar greatly as he knew that he was no longer the fastest in the nations anymore. After at least 20 minutes of full-on sprinting through the trees, Nar noticed something really odd. Stopping in his tracks as best as he could with the damaged balance that he now had, he just stopped himself from falling face first from the branch he was currently on. The reason he stopped was because his incredibly sharp eyes had noticed something on the ground that was, in one word, peculiar. Red was the thought running through his mind as he dropped from the branch and landed less silently than he would have liked. Crouching down, he picked up the red object and inspected it in detail. Hair. Red hair. Oh no. Growing panic, Nar now realized what this piece of red hair signified. His mother was kidnapped. Looking in the direction that the hair fell from, Nar noticed another piece of red hair up ahead, at least 20 meters away from this one. His direction confirmed Nar took off as fast as his body could. Ignoring the fact that he was already becoming slightly winded, he was careful to keep his eyes peeled even more than before for any of the hair strands. It wasn't that long before Nar came up to the kidnapper and his mom. Well, mom was a bit off a strong word considered his mom currently looked like a 13-year-old. Well, at least I know that I am in the right time. Nar was about to jump out of the bushes and save his mom. But he paused and thought, wasn't dad supposed to save mom here? Isn't this where they fell in love? Nar suddenly grew excited as he realized that he would get to see his mother and father fall in love. So Nar followed quietly in anticipation for his father's obviously dramatic rescue. He waited and waited and waited, but there was no signal of anyone coming to save his mom. What the hell? Where is he? Mom told me that dad saved mom long before they came towards the border of Fire Country. If so, why are we only 1 mile out from the border? Come on, dad. Don't let mom and me down. Nar decided to give it until they were in viewing distance of the border. Then he would personally step in. 20 minutes passed. 20 long minutes, and there's still no sign of dad, and they were no in viewing distance of the border. Naro sighed, sorry, dad. With that thought, Naro sped off from his hiding location towards the man kidnapping his mother. He came too quickly for the kidnapper to react. And so there was no defense for the vicious right hook that knocked the man into a tree across the path. Nar caught his mother from falling. And Naro took a second to notice that the kidnapper was simply knocked out and not dead. What? How much strength have I lost? In my universe, I would have punched a hole in the guy. Damn it, what else have I lost? Minato asked a weak voice. And Naruto looked at the young girl in his arms and sighed under his breath and quickly placed a calming smile on his face. No, don't know who this Minato guy is. The name's Naruto Kurama, wandering ninja for hire and also your rescuer. Naruto frankly weird introduction brought a confused look upon the girl's delicate face. Oh no, I didn't ruin some sort of strange confession of love between you and knocked out guy over there. Did I? I always make that mistake, it seems, Nar joked as he jokingly frowned at the girl in his arms who giggled in response at Naruto's attempt to lighten the mood. Something caught the girl's eyes. So, Golden my golden knight to my rescue. Naruto's brows practically shot off his head. He didn't expect his new form to have this kind of effect. No, that's the other guy, Nar supplied in a way to break the awkwardness he was suddenly feeling. He was glad that the girl once again giggled at his joke. So, you okay there, miss? Kushina Uzuaki. And yes, I'm okay. They used anesthetics, so I can't actually move, and I'm very sleepy now that you mention it. Anything else? Nar asked. However, Kusha didn't hear his question as she was currently burrowing deeper into Naruto's arms. So warm. Nice. Hey, no going asleep until you tell me where we're going. Air. Konoha, please, if you know where that is. Thankfully, I do. I was actually on my way there in the first place to ask for employment until I came across your hair on the floor. She didn't know why, but knowing that Naruto was looking to stay in Konoha made her happy. Naruto was nervous. He wasn't sure what was going to happen because of his interference. Hopefully, he wouldn't end up damaging the timeline too bad, but he felt that he still needed to say something to his Muno Kosa in his arms. He contemplated this as he turned to the direction of the village and began the long sprint there. Massing up his courage, Naruto leaned down to the girl in his arms and whispered the three magical words. Your hair's pretty. A surprised beep could be heard as Kusha blushed and bared deeper into her rescuer's arms, and Nar couldn't prevent the laughter that escaped his lips. Maybe he made the right choice for interfering. Only time would tell, but first he had to wonder why this form always made people feel comfortable, which was further proven by the rescued girl drifting to sleep within his arms. Either I've already messed up more than I ever could, or maybe I can still fix this. Doubt it. Time skip. Akasha rose from the sheets that covered her as she inspected where she was and was happy to recognize the stark white room of a hospital room. Ah, Kusha-chan, you're awake, spoke a familiar voice, still feeling the after effects of the drugs. She wasn't able to make out who exactly the person was. Naroke_, she inquires as she sees the vaguely familiar blonde locks. Wait, blonde. A chuckle is heard in the room, and Kasha's head swivels in the other direction and clearly sees the person she just mentioned sat in a chair, still glowing radiantly golden. Taking a second, Kusha looks back to the other person and sees someone else she recognizes. Minato, she asks and receives a nod from said person as he leans in for a hug. It was at that point that Nar assumed that he didn't need to fix anything between his parents. Sadly, he was going to be proven wrong. Something that he felt was going to become a common occurrence. Kosa reeled back from Minato, slapping his face in the process. How dare you? She screams at him. Silence was all that was left in the room after that outburst. Minato held his stinging cheek whilst Naruto cringed painfully. Yep, defiantly going to be a bruise on that sucker tomorrow. Kosa-chan, what? Don't you dare call me that. You didn't try to save me. Nar did, so don't act like you care. Kosa-chan, I tried, but I couldn't keep track. Nar briefly wondered if that was because he picked up one of the hairs. He suddenly felt really stupid for doing that. Don't lie to me. You're just like the rest of them, bullying me because I'm from Yusuzu Shioker. No, get out, you bastard. Minato quickly left. It was at that part that Nar realized that maybe he wouldn't be able to fix this. It seems that Minato rescuing her was the make or break point between them. But Naruto wasn't one for giving up, so he certainly had his work cut out for him. Kusha kept the brave face up for all 4 seconds after Minato left hurriedly before she broke down crying. Nar threw reason to air at that point. Someone he cared for deeply was crying and he was going to fix it. Damn it. Raising from his seated position, Nar quickly moved over to Kusha, which garnered her attention. What? You going to laugh at me, too? No word was spoken as Nar stared into his mother's eyes, and he realized something. This wasn't his mother. This was a girl. This was a girl who was bullied for most of her life. This was a girl whose entire clan was wiped from existence. This was a girl who was recently kidnapped and thought that she was going to die. This was a girl who shared his burden of keeping Kurama at bay. This wasn't his mother. It was a girl in desperate need of someone who cared for her. And he'd be damned if he wasn't up for the job. Slowly reaching out to Kosa, he frowned when she flinched. Hey, you weren't flinching when you fell asleep in my arms. Nar said jokingly, making Kusha once again giggle as she wiped as many tears as she could from her eyes. She was brave girl as she sniffled and smiled back at Nar. That's good. Don't lose that pretty smile. Nar wrapped his arms around the 3 years younger girl's shoulder and simply stood there hugging her as she let out all of the tears that she had held back all the years. Nar leaned in closer to her ear. It goes with that pretty hair of yours. Thank you so much. Kusha managed to retch out as she held on to Naruto like her life depended on the teen in front of her. And it was at that point that Naruto simply thought, screw it. I can't let her be by herself in this state. I'll show that people care about her, that I care about her. I don't care if she is my mother. No person should suffer like this alone. And as I said to myself before, this is not my mother. It took 5 minutes for Kusha to gain some semblance of her emotions, and when she did, she blushed like a ripe tomato, and Nar couldn't help but laugh loudly at her embarrassed face. Shut up, Kusha demanded jokingly as she tried to hide her face from Nar. Oh, I'm sorry. Your face was just so cute, though, Nar stated as he attempted to get another look at her blushing face, laughing as she kept hiding her face from him. So, what are you going to do now? She asked worriedly, hoping that he didn't have to leave. Nar noticed the worried look that she sent him and was glad to feel wanted by someone. Well, I brought you back and straight to the Hogue Tower. When I showed you him, he asked the routine questions. What happened? Who are you? Why did you save her? All that stuff. I told him what happened from what I saw and said that I saved you because I was hoping to join Konoha. That and I enjoy saving pretty girls. A blush found its way onto Kusha's face once again. What then? She managed to get out before she hid her face again. Well, I won't bore you with all the details. He asked what my age was. I said 16. And he asked me what was up with my skin and my strange fiery golden glow. Yay. What is that about? A rare kek jank that my family had the very small chance of developing. I am the second ever to develop it. Oh, what does it do? Nothing much. I can sense somebody's intentions and I also permeate a warm calming sensation upon touch. Oh, I know. Nothing too impressive. Oh, no, it's awesome. You look so cool like that. Kusha exclaimed excitedly, which made Naro laugh. Glad you think so. Anyway, the Hokage asked to test my skills tomorrow for what rank I should receive, and in the meantime, he told me to find some accommodation. Kasha's eyes lit up. Come live with me. Eyes just me at the Uzumaki compound. She explained as Naruto inwardly cringed. Damn, can't say no to her. Nar smiled slightly. I'd be happy too, he answered and Kusha practically exploded with enthusiasm as she glumped Naruto and plowed him over. Nar hit the floor with an oof. They both started laughing hysterically. It was that point that the door to the room opened and in walked 2 worried-looking girls. All sound stopped at that point as the 2 new arrivals saw Kusha lying on top of a glowing man. Makoto-chan, Taji-chan, what are you 2 doing here? The 2 girls simply stared on at the sight before them. Nar couldn't help it. He laughed to his heart's content at the embarrassed face of Kusha as she like before hid her face in his chest. I'll get all of you for this. I promise that Dabo. Naruto then decided that yes, he did make the right choice if only to see the girl on top of him be happy. In the end wasn't his mission to save everyone. What's wrong being a bit selfish once in a while? Nar knew that he was never considered the smart type of person. Hell, most people wouldn't even consider him having the brain capacity of understanding anything that wasn't simple. Of course, these accusations weren't completely unfounded when Naruto was younger, in his world. Anyway, he didn't understand much at all. He didn't understand how Fu and Jasu worked, no matter how much Erosen had tried to instruct him in the subject. It wasn't that he was stupid. He simply did not understand the concepts behind how a piece of paper with scrolls upon could seal away a chakra monster like the Kobe. It was just one of the mysteries that past universe Nar couldn't understand, no matter how hard he tried to figure it out. However, as Nar grew older within his universe, he began to study. He began to learn not just what different types of just there were or how far his forefinger should be ahead of his middle finger whilst holding a kunai in reverse grip, which by the way was a huge pain in the old universe. Naruto learned how to write in the different types of kanji. He learned what the proper table manners were. He even managed to learn how to create and use the main thing that escaped his mind, which was fine. That was a proud part in past Naruto's life. So, in the process of learning everything that he possibly ever could need to learn, there was always one thing that managed to escape his massively improved knowledge, something that even his late great sensei wasn't able to understand even with his long experience with life. The last thing Jiraiya ever said to past Nar goes as follows. Nar, as your sensei, I expect your full attention with what I am going to tell you. Throughout this world, there has always been one thing that I have never been able to figure out. Even my vast spy network wasn't able to find any conclusive info. What is it? Erosen women. You heard me right, brat. Women, specifically teenager women. I can honestly say that the teenage woman is one of the most confusing things in our beautiful world. What the foo? You may think me a fool for such words, but you will see for yourself when you yourself get interested into the opposite. Erosenan, yes, my inexperienced pupil, you're an idiot. Ha, just you wait, brat. Just you wait. And wait, Nar did. And throughout all his years within his universe, he had never come across the so-called confusing teen woman that his late sensei had warned him about. So, in the end, Nar had passed off the strange lesson as one of his sensei's stupid ramblings. But Nar now understood what his sensei had warned him off, because in front of him were three of the teen women, one of which he knew. Still located within the hospital room in which his mother was placed in, he was once again sat down on the chair in the corner. But now it wasn't just him and Kusha. No, now there were two other people in the room, both of the female teen variety. Now, that wouldn't have confused Nar normally, because he had of course interacted with many female teens within his own universe when he himself was a male teenager, and he had never been confused by them. But now he wasn't. It was because of one simple thing. They were whispering about him. This of course would make anyone nervous or anxious, but not really confused, as people whispering about someone usually means that they are saying something rude, and Naruto was defiantly used to that sort of behavior. No, the part that was making his confused was the fact that all three members of the whispering were periodically taking turns to look at the glowing golden ninja. And again, that wouldn't confuse him, But the blushes were. Let it be known that Nar was never any good at recognizing a female's attraction to him cuffed. But something about the three girls, especially his mother, blushing at him as they whispered, unnerved the hell out of him. But he was Naruto Uzumaki, and he'd be damned if he was going to run away from this situation, no matter how much it worried him. That was the idea, until once again his mother gazed in his direction for a second and then winked at him. Naruto's mind shut down. She winked at me. She winked at me. She winked at me. Abort. Abort. Shaking his troubled head, he reassessed his current predicament and came up with a solid conclusion. Well, technically I'm Naruto Kurama now, and I have different ideal than Naruto Uzumaki. The silly kid I was. He was plan decided. Nar stood and gained the attention of all the girls in the room. All of them on Kosa bed, making sure she was okay. Nar briefly thought it nice that Kusha at least had some friends here in Konoha. Naruto what's up? Asked his moth. Kusha nod mother. Naruto scratched his head, which was his nervous habit, which he was never able to grow out of. I'm just going to catch some fresh air. It's still early and you're not allowed to leave until tonight. So, I figured I'd get my bearings off my hopeful new village, then come back and pick you up so you can show me where the Uzumaki compound is, Naruto explained clearly. But he had forgotten one simple thing in his plan. He hadn't realized that Kasha had not told her friends that he was going to stay at her place, which was confirmed rather loudly when each friend screamed out a combined, "What foot enter mouth?" Keep going for 4 meters. Kusha sent a fake glare in Naruto's direction whilst he simply smiled innocently for a few seconds. Anyway, I'm sure that Kusha-chan can explain everything. Bye. I'll see y'all tonight, Kosa-chan. And with that, Naruto frankly disappeared from before their very eyes in a golden flash. All three girls gasped in amazement, as the only people they have seen disappear that fast was the Junin around the village. And even then, they never left such a cool after effect. However, this stunned silence didn't last for long, as both of Kosa's friends turned back towards her and gave her a look. Kusha grinned nervously. He can explain. She supplied weakly. The look continued. Naruto, I'm so going to get you for this line. A golden glow appeared upon the top of the Hokage mountain. This glow turned out to be Naruto, as he couldn't keep the small grin from leaving his face. He knew he was going to pay for that comment of tonight, but he didn't mind. It had been a while since he had embarrassed anyone, and he was going to take any opportunity that he could in this reality. But right now, he needed a moment to himself to sort out his thoughts. Being in that room was starting to really to get to him, and it wasn't because of the hormonal teenagers in there. Seating himself down upon the third's head, Naruto delves into his thoughts. Okay, first thing first, my living accommodations are sorted, as is my place in the Konoha Shinobi Force. After I prove my strength tomorrow, I'll get a rank and fit accordingly into the force. That reminds me, how much of my strength should I reveal? If I show it all, it would create suspicious as to how no one's ever heard of me before. Something I learned the hard way back in my reality. Strength cannot be hidden again once revealed. Or is it strength cannot be hidden from fangirls? It's hard to distinguish most times. Well, since I can't show my full strength, I'll only strength that is equivalent with a Heil Tunen, a 20th of my current power. Might seem like a lot, but I've lost a lot of my strength from coming into this reality. If I could guess, I'd say I'm as strong as I was when I first unlocked the first form of my tailed beast mode. I'll obviously need to see if I can salvage the relationship between my Musha and Minato. If not, then well, okay, so to summarize, I am to get the rank of Chunin, attempt to fix Kosa and Minato's relationship, and then just see what happens after that. Maybe see if I can make some friends. I know I'll just have to see Bakken as a woman. Hell, I'll even get to see G. Arrows Senin, I failed you as well, it seems. But I promise that in this new reality that I find myself in, I won't let you down. This time, I'll save everyone. With his mind made up, Naruto stood from the head and noted that the moon had moved from before, signifying that Naruto had been sat there for a few hours at least. Taking a second to pay his respects to the first and the second Wa gauges, Naruto once again disappeared in a golden flash line. Kasha was just getting out of the hospital. She had been told by the doctors that she was simply suffering from the after effects of the drugs and that a good night's sleep would help her a lot. Her friends had been asked to leave an hour after Nar left. Where is Nar? Kasha thought as she stood outside the hospital. She had been standing there for a few minutes now and was starting to become worried that Nar wasn't going to show. Uncontrolled panic started to set in at the thought of another person abandoning her. Please, no. No. Don't let him leave me, too. Not so soon. Kasha closed her eyes tightly to block the tears that were about to come until she felt a hand on her shoulder, and an incredibly calming feeling encompassed her entire being. Turning around, she found the glistening golden eyes of Naruto staring at her. A large grin grew on Naruto's face at Kasha's surprised expression. What? Worried I forgot about ya. Impossible. With your loud voice, I couldn't miss ya even if I tried. Nar stated boldly and couldn't stop the laughter from Kosa's angry blush-induced glare at him. Shut up you. Kosa shouts at Nar as she pushes him away from her in an attempt to save face. By now, Nar had calmed himself down from laughing and decided to get to the point. Taking a deep gentlemanly bow, Naruto raises his head so his golden eyes could see Kasha's violet eyes. Kasha-chan, please lead me to your compound if you're ready. Kasha's eyes attempt to look anywhere except Naruto's glowing eyes, but they ultimately end up looking at the 6 identical black bars that marred his face. They looked so otherworldly that it mystified her. But Naruto's words brought her back from her daydreaming. Smiling brightly at Nar, she nods her head and motions for him to follow her. The walk wasn't that long. Nar realized as 10 minutes from the hospital they had arrived at the compound, and Nar found it a little underwhelming compared to the Uchiha and Hoiga compound, but he really didn't care. It had suited him fine. He also didn't ask why there was no one else around in the compound, already knowing that Kasha was the only Uzumaki left right now. Once Naruto had been shown to a room that was too good for him, but Kasha insisted that he take it. He could guess it was because that it was across from Kasha's room, but that was only a guess. After that, Kasha had shown him around and brought him to a comfy-looking living room filled with multiple comfy-looking chairs and couches. And that's where we find the pair at the moment. Both of them seated across from each other. In the otherwise empty room, Naruto briefly thought of the fact that all of these empty chairs was just another member of his clan that he would never meet and carried on with his thoughts. However, for Kasha, who knew everyone in the compound before they all died, it was a brutal reminder that she was all alone in the big scary world. Nar noticed the soured look that was adorning Kasha's face, and he decided that that look should never be on that face. So Kasha-chan, how about we fully introduce ourselves? Kasha raised her head at Naruto looking slightly confused. You know, age, likes, dislikes, what you're currently doing in your ninja career. You know, simple things like that so we get to know each other better. I'll even go first if you want. Kasha nods her head eagerly, wanting to know as much as she could about her savior. Okay, then. As you know, my name's Naruto Kurama. I am 16 years old. I like training, helping people, and eating ramen. My dislikes are the time it takes to cook ramen, jerks, and people who judge a book by its cover. I am currently unemployed in the ninja profession. I suppose I'll get a position tomorrow after I pass the Hogue test. Kasha sucked up all of the knowledge like a sponge, but one part of it surprised her. You're only 16. Whoa, how are you so awesome when you're still so young? Kasha asks in amazement. Naruto chuckles and answers truthfully. A lot of hard work and never giving up. That's how now I told you about me. Time for you to tell me. Kasha nods again, a little less sure of herself this time. My name is Kosa Uzuaki. I am 13 years old. I like making friends, training, and ramen. I dislike people who leave me and how long it takes to cook ramen. I am currently in my last year at the Shinobi Academy, soon to become a genin. Nar smiled widely. That's awesome. And hey, we both love ramen. That's great. We should get some after my test as a celebration food. Nar states confidently whilst Kusha looks slightly worried. I really hope so. I don't know what will happen if you don't pass this test. I don't want you to leave so soon. The time that Kosa used pulls at Naruto's many heartstrings and he smiles brightly. And it could be Kusha's eyes deceiving her, but the glow of Naruto's body seemed to grow slightly from that smile. But she ultimately pushed it off as a simple trick of the lights. Don't worry, Kusha-chan. They'd have to throw me out of here. I'm not leaving you anytime soon, Dad. Bo. Nar gasped as he covers his mouth in embarrassment as Kusha just looks at the glowing golden knight in shock. Nar just stares back nervously. A few seconds pass before Kusha grows a huge smile. Yada. I knew that Dad Biao wasn't stupid. Dad Biao. Nar couldn't stop the smile on his face if he tried. What Susha just did was really cute to Nar. Nar checks the time on the clock on the wall and is surprised to see that it was midnight. My test was set at 8. I need to get some rest and I'm actually pretty tired from everything happening today. It also seems like Kusha herself is pretty beat. And it was true if her drooping eyelids were any indication. Clapping his hands, he stands up and stretches dramatically. Alright, Kusha-chan, time for bed. I've got an early morning tomorrow, and I assume that the academy opens early as well. Kusha's nodding head answers his question as they both go to their respective rooms, wishing each other a good night. They both slide their doors close and prepare for bed. Inside Naruto's room, he undressed himself, wearing nothing but his pants. When Naruto's jacket is removed and placed on a nearby chair, he was surprised to see that his jacket lost its golden glow and returned to its original color. The jacket was a long-sleeved jacket with dark orange sleeves within the rest black. The jacket's length was ankle-reaching. However, his chest was still glowing golden. It looked like fire was flowing from him all over. Nar sighed. This whole glowing thing was starting to become confusing. Naruto even tested his glow by placing his hand on his jacket and sighed in resignation when the jacket lit up in a golden glow. It seems like all of my clothes will always glow when I wear them. Super. But that doesn't explain why Kusha's clothes didn't glow. Maybe it's because of the fact that it only affects me in clothes that aren't already being worn. It's the best guess I've got, I suppose. Shrugging his shoulders, Nar gets into the bed and groans when the bed itself starts to glow as well as the cover on top of him. This whole glowing thing is going to get really annoying. I bet it looks like I'm lying in a bed of fire. Maybe I can prank Kusha-chan with this. Well, at least it's really warm and calming. A benefit of my condition, I suppose. Naruto sighs as he turns onto his side to get more comfortable. Closing his eyes, he's briefly surprised at how quickly he fell asleep. Oh well, time for a new life, I guess. Lying in Kusha's room, she was feeling worried. She didn't feel entirely comfortable by herself after what happened yesterday. She didn't want to be by herself. Calm down, Kushi. You're safe now. Nar is across the hallway, and nothing will get past him. I trust him completely, but maybe I should just have a quick look and make sure he's not left. Kusha knew she was being silly with her unfounded worry, but after what happened, she had to be sure. She couldn't help it. She just needed to be sure that Naruto was still with her. Getting out of her bed, dressed in baggy orange pajamas with little green frogs on them. She had been lying in her bed for about 2 hours, not being able to get any sleep, and nightmares were all that awaited her when she managed to go unconscious. Tiptoeing across the room, she gently slid open the door. Peeking her head out, she grumbles slightly as her bed hair falls across her face. Looking across the hallway, she braces herself and then tiptoes across the hallway towards the sliding door. Just a quick peek to make sure. Taking a deep breath, Kusha gently slides open the door and peeks inside and her breath is taken away with what she saw. Inside Naruto's room was Nar fast asleep in the bed and himself glowing golden like fire. It seriously looked like Nar was sleeping on a bed of fire. It looks so calm and safe. Not being able to stop herself, Kusha inches forward into Naruto's room, her eyes locked onto the glowing radiance that was Nar in his bed. Once she comes up to the side of the bed, her legs just inches away from touching the bed. Slowly, hesitantly, she lifts her arm and reaches out excruciatingly slowly. Just one touch. Just one little touch. Then I'll go straight back to bed. I just have to know what it feels like. Kusha's hand was so close now. Just a few more inches and she would be touching Naruto's face. So close it was now. One more inch and she would have her curiosity sated. So close. Naruto's eyes opened, his eyes instantly seeing Kusha's hand line. Naruto had no idea what was happening when he opened his eyes. All he knew was that Kusha was now in his room and was trying to touch his face. What are you supposed to say in this situation? I have no words. Nar just stared at Kosa's frozen body, her eyes opened wide in fear and surprise, her hand twitching as if she had no more control over the appendage. Nar pitied the girl at this point. She was like him when he was younger, so scared of everything. Nar just stared at Kusha as the girl's breathing started to become labored and quick. Quickly, Nar held out his hand in an open palm gesture. This gesture confused Kusha, who took a hesitant step back. She wasn't supposed to be caught. It's okay, Kasha-chan. It's okay. Just tell me what you're doing. I'm not angry. Naruto's gentle voice brought Kusha out of her panic as her eyes refocused on Naruto's eyes. A massive blush adorned her face as she turned to leave. She got to the door and paused in her steps, knowing that Naruto was looking confused at her. I just wanted to be sure. Naruto stayed silent as Kusha stood at the door, shaking slightly. He wasn't going to force her to speak. Right now, Kosa was in a very precarious position, and any wrong move could spell disaster. I just wanted to make sure you hadn't left me. As well, her voice was quiet. Naruto had to strain his ears just to be able to hear her speak. She left without another word and Nar just sat in his bed, his mind working overtime. She didn't mention any of these problems when I talked to her in my reality. She mentioned that her child life was rather fun and fancy. Oh God, don't tell me that this reality differs greatly from my reality. If so, then there's going to be problems later on. Naruto's mind wandered back through the day, recalling any important factors of the day. He recalled the meeting he had with the Hokage. Flashback. Nar enters into the Hogue's office to see the third in all his glory. Jesus, he's looking young now. I never imagined Oji-san to have black hair. It doesn't suit him in my opinion. Hattori-chan tells me that you saved a member of my village from a kidnapping and for that I thank you from the depths of my heart for bringing dear Kasha-chan back to Konoha. The third speaks just like Naruto remembered, like a gentle grandfather who cares deeply for everyone. It seemed even in his younger years, the third Hokage was a gentle person. Yes, Hokage-sama. I was traveling through the region hoping to get a position in your village when I came across a strand of red hair in the forest. Thinking it was strange, I followed in the direction of the hairs and came across Kusha being kidnapped by some ninjas. After saving her, I brought her back here and that sums it up. The third nods, taking everything in. After a few seconds, he asks a few questions. Do you know what village they were from? No. Sorry, but they wore no headbands. However, if I were to guess, I assume they were not Rouge ninjas. They were too organized. One person carrying the victim, whilst others were ahead waiting at the border, waiting until the captor made it across the border. The Hokage nodded his head again, already guessing such a thing. Well, do not worry yourself over these things, Naruto. I'll up the security around the Uzumaki compound and see to it that Kusha-chan is kept safe. However, I recall you mentioning you wish to join Konoha. Am I correct? Nar nodded and they went through the process of setting up the test for his rank. Throughout the whole meeting, Naruto couldn't stop the warm feeling he had whilst he conversed with his Pooh's grandfather figure. All the meeting did was cement even further the fact that he was going to save everyone. The meeting ended. He'd be tested by a selected individual of the Hogue's choice. They'd fight to test Naruto's skills and then he would be given a position deserving of the level of skill shown. Simple flashback end. It was good seeing the third again after so long. It brought up a lot of good memories. Anyway, if there were any differences in this world, then he'd adjust and carry on. His plan stayed the same no matter what. He was going to save everyone. It was a matter of fact. Loud, gurish snoring could be heard from through his door. Nar smiled happily, but first he needed some sleep. Line, it was morning now, and Nar could tell that for a few reasons, none of which were because of the fact that he saw daylight. Reason 1 was because Nar himself was awake and let it be known that he had never been late getting up before 7 in the morning in his reality after the 4th Great Shinobi War happened. He just couldn't manage any more sleep than that these days. Reason 2 was because the gurish snoring that was obnoxiously loud yet cute had stopped and the rustling of feet could be heard coming from across the hallway as well as the fumbling of clothes and rushed dressing. Reason 3 was because the person making those noises had decided to make sure that Naruto himself was awake and so proceeded to dogpile on top of the awake Naruto in his bed. So with a helpful shout of Naro Aniki, Naruto was being crushed by Kusha jumping on him. All Naruto could think of whilst he was being hugged to death by Kusha was that Aniki sounded wrong in his head. But he wasn't going to voice his thoughts for fear of hurting the laughing girl on top of him. All Nar could see was red hair that as Kusha's face was buried in his chest, laughing hysterically. Through a muffled voice, Nar managed to get out a few choice words. So, you seem to be all better now. Naruto saw Kusha raise her head and look him in the eyes. Those violet eyes that he had ingrained into his brain as they were such beautiful eyes. Many people have said that his cerulean eyes were the most captivating thing about which he got from his father's genes. But Naruto could honestly say that his mother's violet eyes beat out his father's blue eyes any day of the week. You could literally get lost in her eyes forever. However, it wasn't meant to be, as the sound of Kosa clearing her throat got Naruto's attention once again, and he had to hide the small grin he had from seeing a small blush across Kusha's cheeks. Kusha nodded to Naruto's previous statement, a huge smile on her face. Yep, all better. How can I not be when I have my big strong Aniki is here to stay? The blinding smile on Kosa's face would put Naruto's younger selves to shame. It was literally the cutest thing that Naruto had ever saw, and he knew people like Hinata for Cam's sake. Naruto smirked. Even though the idea of being considered an Aniki left a bad taste in his mouth for some reason, he wouldn't shun the kindness that Kusha was showing to him. So big brother nay. The embarrassed blush on Kusha's face was worth the bitter taste of the word in his mouth. Why do you have to embarrass me? Kusha asked in a meek voice. Nar just laughed and placed his hand on top of Kusha's head. Because that's what Anikis do, he states firmly. And at this point, Kosa's eyes were practically glued to Naruto's as he smiled cheekily at her gobsmacked expression. Does that mean Kusha left the question hanging in fear of Nar rejecting her? Nar just smiled and cupped her cheeks, which were incredibly puffy at this moment. I'd be honored to be your Aniki. Even if Nar wanted to, he wouldn't be strong enough to unlatch Kusha's arms from around his neck. And she buried her face in Naruto's crook of his neck as she screamed in excitement into it. Nar, like he was doing most of the time around the girl, just laughed heartily. Alright, I'm happy, too. Now, what time is it? Nar asked as he finally managed to unlatch Kusha's arms from around his neck, and she stood up from his bed to allow him to move. It seemed to finally dawn on Kusha that she just jumped on top of a partially man. Obviously, blushes occurred. It's a little past 7:30. The academy starts at 8:45. What time is you test today? 10 minutes past 9. Oh, okay. With that, Kushina turns to leave. Whoa. Hang on a sec. Where do you think you're going? Kusha turns confused. Something she seemed to be a lot since meeting Nar. Don't tell me you were going to go to the academy without me. Kusha's brows rise in surprise. Surely he didn't mean what she hoped he meant. As your unofficial Aniki, it's my duty to walk you to from the academy. Whilst Kusha's heart flutters at hearing those words, her face suddenly frowns in annoyance. She didn't want her Aniki to suffer the glares she suffers each day. That's great and all, but I think I should go by myself. She attempted to stop Naruto from going, but as she spoke, he had already put on his jacket, it surprising her briefly when the jacket itself flared to life from the firelight glow that now covered it. That's so cool. Kusha gushes. Nar chuckles, checking himself over the last time. He is happy with himself. Another benefit from the glowing is that Nar never smelled bad, which was proven as Nar didn't smell any different from before. Stretching slightly to work out any kinks he might have gained from overnight. He is happy to hear no cracks as he stretches. Finishing up, he ushers Kusha out of his room and he follows. Closing the door, he turns to Kosa, who was looking really nervous for some reason. It was at this point Nar realized that even though his body was 16 once again, he still was really tall for the age, standing at 6 feet 2, whilst Kusha only stood at 4 feet 8, a respectable height for a preteen. It really drove home the idea of him being a big brother. Got everything ready, Kusha-chan? Yep. Naruto smiled as he holds out his hand. Right then, come on then. Kusha tentatively reaches out her hand upwards, but it seems to freeze halfway there. Nar smiles kindly and extends his reach and gently grabs Kusha's hand in his. Nar didn't even have to look at her to know that she was blushing up a furious storm at him holding her hand. Maybe being big brother won't be so bad. However, there was still that nagging feeling in the back for Naruto's mind, telling him that he wanted to be more than a big brother. What more thought? It didn't know. The pair reached the front door and Naruto slides it open and lets Kusha lead him through. Still holding hands. It seemed that Kusha had a tighter grip than Nar had though. Nar smiled at as the bright sunshine shone down on his and her forms. He takes a deep breath to start of this brand new day. His first day. He takes a deep breath to start off his new reality, right? Oh, look. It's her. Who's that with her? Is he a demon sympathizer? I hope not. Scum like her doesn't deserve friends. Shut up. I think he heard you. So what? Have you seen him? He's glowing. Yay. So that means he's probably already a demon like her. The frown now currently upon the glowing person's face was so annoyed, angry that he had to hold himself back from going to these people talking and beat the hell out of them. The glowing man takes a quick look at his companion, a red-haired preteen known as Kusha, and sees no negative facial expression on her face. However, that didn't mean that she hadn't heard what people had been saying. And the glowing person knew this by the way that she had gripped the glowing person's hand even tighter than before and began to walk ever so slightly quicker down the path to the ninja academy. Hey Nar Aniki, how strong are you? Nar turned his head to the left to see Kusha looking at him with a curious expression on her face. Nar realized that she was simply attempting to get her mind away from all of the negative whispering people were doing as they strolled hand in hand down the street. Nar took a second to assess how much he should reveal about his strength. Well, I'm not too sure to be honest. If I were to hazard a guess, I'd say that was pretty strong. Nar turned his head back to Kosa to see a blank expression on her face as she simply stared at Nar, annoyed. You told me nothing from that. Nar smiled cheekily at the young girl as he lifted his forefinger to his lips. Shish, that's a secret, Kushi-chan. Even though Naruto had turned his head back to the road, he could feel the infuriated glare that she was giving him. That just made Nar grin even larger as he realized that his new favorite activity was to irritate little Kusha. Nar felt the young girl beside him shove him slightly, and Nar chuckled slightly as he gave a gentle squeeze to her hand in response. For some reason, any of the awkwardness that he had felt from before had left him. He was just jolly that he was able to make Kusha feel happy. It was fulfilling to know that he hadn't lost his gift of kindness from all of his solitary years back in his universe. No, come on, Nar. No more thinking of the past. Best to simply move on and live in the now. The pair had now come up to the Ninja Academy, and Nar saw all of the students going inside of the academy. It felt nostalgic to Nar. The academy looked almost exactly the same when he went to the academy in his time. However, one of the many benefits of being his age right now was the fact that he didn't have to go to the academy himself. He wouldn't be able to handle that boredom. Turning his head to look at the young girl beside him, he sees the nervous, almost hesitant look she had on her face. Nar took a second to look at what she was staring at. Naruto's eyes widened slightly as he saw the blonde-haired preteen that was his father in his universe. Minato was staring at the pair looking incredibly apologetic and nervous. At this moment, Naruto's mind had a brilliant idea. Turning back to Kusha, Nar lowers himself to his knees and turns her to face him. Okay, now I'm going to ask you to listen to what I have to say. I think you should give the little guy another chance of friendship. Kusha opened her mouth to argue as his brows lowered into a frown. Nar found it to be incredibly cute as her lips pouted. Hey, no back chat, Kushi-chan. I'm your Aniki, and as your Aniki, you have to do as I say. Nar stated proudly as he grinned cheekily. Kusha blushed at the grin, but still managed to bop Nar on the head for his command. Nurad shook his head in joke pain as he chuckled slightly. But seriously, you should always try to make friends, otherwise you might end up regretting it in the future. No, he left me. He didn't try to save me. Kusha had now closed her eyes as the memories of being kidnapped came flooding back with a vengeance. Nar instantly held Kusha in a hug, knowing that his glowing form would calm her mind. He leaned his head to her ear as she shook, keeping the tears from flowing. He lowered his head to her ear to whisper to her. Hey, it's okay. No one's going to harm you with me around. You hear me? Now, I'm not saying that you have to instantly forgive him. Just hear him out. Yay. Kusha looked up at Naruto's to see his kind smile and managed a small nod as well as a weak smile in response. Now wipe your eyes and give me a huge smile. Nar said boldly as he patted the young girl upon the head. Kusha giggled lightly as she hurriedly wiped her puffy eyes from the horrid memories of 2 days ago. Once she finished wiping her eyes, she gave Naruto a huge bright smile and surprised Nar even further by lunging her arms around his neck and giving him a tight hug. Naruto laughed happily as he hugged her back in care. See, that's the sort of attitude that I want to see from you. No more sad faces. Okay, that just makes me sad as well. Kusha pulled back and blushed as she untangled her arms from around Naruto's neck. Okay, Naruto Nikki. Thanks a lot. Anytime, Kushi-chan. Now get inside and make sure to keep that happy smile. You hear me? Kusha giggled as she nodded and turned away from Nar and walked over to where Minato was standing nervously. Nar stood back up and chuckled to himself. Kusha had a lot of problems, but all she needed was people to be there for her just like Naruto back when he was in the academy. Suddenly, Nar remembered something that he needed to find out. Kasha, wait a sec, said young girl turned around as she stood next to Minato and she looked at the golden glowing ninja. What time do you finish? 4:30. Why? Because I'm going to be picking you up. Why else? So, make sure to wait for me here if I am not here straight away. I'm going to buy you ramen. Nar knew that he shocked Kusha with saying that and he turned around. He also knew he made her really happy due to the girlish scream of joy coming from Kosa's direction. The small smirk couldn't be stopped from forming on Naruto's face as he headed towards the training area where he would receive the test from the Hokage to join Konoha as shinobi. I wonder who will be testing me. Probably a no-name Shunin or Jonin. I don't really know about anyone in this time that's above an academy position except from the obvious. Nar stopped in his walking before he arrived at the training ground. He had some misguided citizens to correct. With a golden flash, Nar disappeared and reappeared right in front of a few male-female civilians who were the ones talking rather rudely about Kusha and himself. Why hello there, my good men and women. I couldn't help but notice that you were all saying some rather rude things to little Kushi-chan whilst we strolled by so I could take her to the academy. I'd like to know why. As Naruto said this, his tone was strangely too joyful. Whilst two of the civilians had began to sweat bullets, one of the rather brave civilians chuckle as he gets up into Naruto's face. Isn't it obvious? Because she's a demon. It's that simple. Is that right? Ha. Yay. That's right. And I recommend that you stay away from her as well. Otherwise, you might start to become a demon. Throughout the whole short conversation, Naruto had nothing but a smile on his face. However, if you looked in his eyes, you'd see that he was not amused at all. Nar places his hand on the man's shoulder, the smile still on his face as the man smiles back smugly. I think I might kill you. Silence permeates the air as everyone nearby gasp at the words spoken. The man Nar placed his hand shoulder on, eyes are opened wide, sweat now pouring down his face as his teeth begin to shiver. You see, I might just do that. Boot, I'm not going to. The man stopped dead as he attempted to say something. Finally, after a few seconds of simply flapping his gums, he manages to stutter out. What? I'm not going to kill Y. What don't y'all understand from that? Instead, I'm going to tell you something really important. What is that? Nar leaned in slightly. His smile disappeared, replaced with a blank look as he stared directly into the man's sweating face. If you ever even think something bad about little Kushi-chan, I will destroy everything about you, and when you reach hell and I catch up to you, I'll do it all over again. You understand me? The man nodded hurriedly, and Naruto removed his hand, formed the man's shoulder as the smile returned. That's super. Glad we understand each other. I'm going to go now and remember no bad thoughts. With that, Nar simply turned around and strolled away whistling innocently. Another thing to be noted about Nar compared to when he was 16 within his universe is that the new universe's Naruto had already lived for many years within his universe and thus has also been accustomed to a lot more violence than even the Fourth Shinobi War showed. This Naruto was mature, smart, kind, and ruthless when needed. Unlike the old Naruto who didn't have a ruthless bone in his body, this Naruto had lived on past the war, past all of his friends and loved ones. This Naruto understood that some people couldn't be convinced through words or even through the use of fists. This Nar knew that some people just needed to be ended, and usually this Nar would have simply followed through with his death threat from before. However, this Nar had also been subjected to Kusha, the sad but wanting to be happy young girl that was his mother. And meeting her had changed him from his old ways. He was beginning to become like his old self, and he loved it. He loved becoming like his old self. After all of the crap that had happened to him back in his universe, he was happy that he was still able to be happy in this new universe. It was like all of the despair that he had been holding in had simply vanished when he met his not mother. I really need to sort my thoughts out on that. It's getting really weird on how I should refer to her in my head. However, Naruto couldn't think further on this as he realized that he was in fact going to be very late if he didn't start to speed up. So, without a second thought, Naruto hopped from street level onto a nearby roof and began heading towards the specified training ground. A few minutes later, Naruto had arrived to the training ground and it was if nostalgia was following his today because the training ground that he would be taking his test in would be Training Ground 7. Training Ground 7 brings back all of the memoirs of how much of a dumbass I was back then and there's a lot of them. Just in time Naruto-kun. Allow me to introduce the person that I have chosen to test you. The Hokage motioned his arm towards the only other person in the training ground and Naruto groaned in his head because Jiraiya of the Sannin was standing there. Out of everyone possible to test me, the Hokage deems it necessary to have one of the Sonins to test me. Kami hates me. It's confirmed. Nar took a good look at his late sensei in his universe, and all of the repressed emotions came flooding back with a vengeance. Thankfully, Nar had become used to the submergence of sealed away emotions since he came to this place. Naruto-kun, allow me to introduce one of pupils when I was a Jonin sensei, Jiraiya of the Tsunami. Jiraiya stood proudly behind the Hokage with his hands on his hips and a smug grin on his lips. Yep, he's still in. He a kid. As the old man said, I'm Jiraiya of the legendary Sonin and I'm going to be testing you out right now. Naruto nodded dumbly, unsure on what to say to the exuberant man. Thankfully, the Hokage saw the need to explain a few important details first. Now, it may seem a bit weird why I've chosen one of my best ninjas for this test, but I had a feeling about you that you might be something else entirely. Naruto had the decency to blush, but thankfully his glowing form hid it from the other two. I think you may be overestimating me, Hokage-sama. Nonsense. The old man doesn't get his feelings wrong. And with that cool-looking K-Jenk, I can see why he feels that way. Nar shook his head in exasperation. Trust that his golden form would give someone the idea that he was powerful and normally he'd be more than happy to show off his skills. But I can't really show off too much. I'm trying to be incognito and raise any suspicion as to how I have so much power in the first place. Okay, even though my bloodline ability is nothing more than a calming aura, I'll accept your feeling, but I fear you may be disappointed. The Hokage nodded pleasantly. It'd be hard to disappoint someone who was so kind to everyone. Do not fret, Naruto. You won't be judged harshly. Now, shall I lay down the rules? Both members nodded as Serbi began his rules. Everything is allowed except from killing blows and anything above a rank. Just the Hokage took a moment to make sure that both competitors had heard him correctly before continuing. You will both begin when I say, and when I have seen enough I will stop the test. Both other members in the field nodded and Nar began warming himself up for the test. I may be going to hold back a lot, but that doesn't mean I can't show off a little. I mean I want to able to give Kushi-chan a story about how her Aniki managed to hold his own against Asani. Naruto finished warming and then took his fighting stance, which consisted with Naruto bringing his fists up to his face in a somewhat unprofessional street fighting stance. Naruto had never been a fighter who cared to have a real fighting style. When it came to the physical aspect of fighting, Nar simply used what he felt was best in the situation at the time. He'd do unusual things such as go from a feinted punch straight into a headbutt, shocking his opponent. Now, most people would consider Naruto's no-style fighting weird, but Nar would argue and state that it's simply another factor that added to his unpredictability, something that he thought every ninja should aspire to be. Yes, Nar had maybe grown a small ego, but who could blame him? After all, in his universe, he was considered the single man who ended the Fourth Shinobi World War, as well as bringing peace about the world. A peace that not everyone got to experience. At least he hadn't become Uchiha levels of arrogance. Kausuka. Nar certainly wasn't bitter about that prick. Nar shook his head. Best to be prepared. Even though Jiraiya of his time was super strong, he was also quite aged. Nar would now be fighting him in the prime of his life. He couldn't let up at all. Otherwise, he'd be humiliated and end up with a Janine rank or something. And I refused to be stuck with that rank again. I never had the chance to apply for a higher promotion even after the war. Now Oji-san said no jutsu above a rank that leaves nothing except from the academy basics and my transformation, and something tells me that whilst the result would be hilarious to witness, it wouldn't really impress anyone in the end. Nar couldn't even use his signature move Cage Bush, as it is a sacred move known only to the Forbidden Scroll. Physical fighting it is. Then before anything could happen, the Hokage once again spoke. I'd like to ask before we begin, we recently imported a new machine called a TV into Konoha, which can transfer moving images live to any other TV through the use of a satellite. I am just wondering if both of you wouldn't mind being recorded during this test to also test if this contraption works. Nar pondered about that information for a moment. By the time he was born in his universe, TVs had already been implemented into every house and classroom. What the Hokage just said reminded him that he had not only left his universe, but that he had gone far back in time as well. Who would be watching this match? The Hokage turned his head to his past pupil. This would be live to the academy to show them what they can become with determination and the will of fire, as well as a select few clan locations. Naruto and Jiraiya looked at each other and nodded, and the Hokage smiled as the contraption that would record the test was set up. What the hell is this? Slot into slot B. What's slot B? Where the hell is the adapter lead? The adapter lead. Nar couldn't stop the hand that palmed his face in embarrassment as the supposedly professional crew to set up the contraption were seeming less and less competent as the seconds went by. Ah crap. What? I cut myself on what? There's nothing to cut yourself on. Up yours, Ikamo. Naruto just stared as the Hokage stepped in to help the crew, and in seconds the contraption was working. The reason why it wasn't. Someone didn't turn on the power source. The idea that Nar had traveled into a universe where everyone was a dumbass crossed his mind briefly before he shook that thought out of his head. Okay, we're live in 3, 2, and 1. Begin. With the shout from the Hokage, both competitors charged forth at each other. Naruto ducked underneath a fist from his late master and brought his own fist up to strike his late sensei's chin. Nar already knew that his master was going to dodge that strike, so instead of waiting for his sensei to dodge, he jumped back in an attempt to gain distance between him and his master. Once he landed and once again raised his fists in front of his face in his no-style fighting, his late master chuckled, "Impressive. You managed to keep up with my strike. Granted, I am holding back considerably as we have no real knowledge what you can handle." Nar grumbled. He was being underestimated, and no matter what Nar may go through in his life, he hated being underestimated. Nar jumped forward at half his max speed. However, he was still fast enough to be hard to see by anyone except from the Hokage and the Sannin. In a flash, he was within range of the Sannin, who looked mildly surprised at seeing the glowing man so close so quickly. Naruto punched outwards with his right fist and was unsurprised when the Sonin managed to lean to the side slightly to avoid the punch. Jiraiya countered by grabbing his arm and throwing the universe-traveling ninja over his shoulder. Nar took this in stride as he flipped in midair and landed safely on his feet. Before anything else could happen, Nar shot forward at the same speed as before and tried to punch his master once again. Once again, Jiraiya dodged to the side and reached out to grab his arm. Nar expected this, however, and pulled his arm back in a feint, and just like he thought of before, he leaned in the same direction as his sensei and brought his head forward and bashed it against Jiraiya's in a violent display. Silence was everywhere as all the people present simply stared, slack-jawed at Naruto's frankly bizarre attack. A groan of pain could be heard throughout the forest as Jiraiya stumbled backwards, holding his forehead in pain. He knew there would be a lump there tomorrow after that. It took a second for Nar realized that he had just headbutted one of the Sonin in the forehead. A forehead with a head protector on. How did that hurt him more than me? A chuckle is heard as Naruto turns his head to see the Hokage chuckling slightly. That was an unusual attack, Naruto. Although I must say that I'm surprised that you managed to hurt Jericho even though he had his head protector on. Makes me wonder what your head is made of. Nar grumbled as he returned to the fight. He briefly wondered if Kusha was watching the fight through the TV. The Hokage did say that the fight would be broadcasted to the academy and select locations. Little did he know that Kusha was in fact watching the fight, and safe to say she was incredibly amazed at what she saw her Aniki do. Line break. Kusha had just entered the academy. Excitement running through her core as she just heard from her Aniki that they were going to get ramen after lessons. Yes, this is awesome. Kusha took a moment to calm herself as she and Minato walked down the corridor towards their classroom. Kusha didn't know what to think of the boy walking next to her. Just yesterday, she had slapped him and accused him of abandoning her. However, just like Naruto had told her, she listened to what he had to say. And after hearing his explanation, she felt like she could have handled the situation yesterday better. Minato told her that he was following the trail that she had left with her red hair. But for some reason, the trail just ended. Minato had just found another piece of hair and followed the direction that was garnered from the hair. And then there was simply no more hair to be found anywhere. Kusha thought about that for a while. How could the hair just have stopped? She kept cutting strands off. Suddenly, her brain had a thought. Nar had found her. He found her by following the red hair. So, did that mean he was the one who moved her hair strand? So, that means that the only reason Minato didn't save MI was because Nar found the next hair strand first. So, it was her red hair that allowed her to find her new Aniki. Kusha smiled slightly at that thought. It was just another reason why she now loved her long red hair. She took a quick glance at Minato and saw him nervously smile at her. She knew that he was scared of her not accepting his story. But when she smiled at the young boy, he knew that he was forgiven and that maybe their friendship could recontinue. They entered the classroom and both were confused by the strange black box present on the instructor's table. They both take their respective seats. Kusha sat between her best friends. Hitomi Hyuga and Makoto Uchiha with Taji sat in front of her on the row down. Hitomi took a second to smile kindly at Kusha before an apologetic look crossed her face. I'm sorry for not coming to see you, Kusha, but there was a clan meeting and I was needed there. Kusha just smiled back and gave her pale-eyed friend a tight hug. It's okay, Hitomi-chan. I'm actually almost happy about the whole thing because now I have my Aniki. Hitomi smiled happily at Kusha's excitement. Oh, yay. I heard from Miko-chan and Taji-chan that this strange glowing man saved you. But isn't he a little old to be your big brother? Kusha shook her head. No, he's only 16, 3 years older than us. What? That's amazing. What's his name anyway? It's Nar Kurama. Before anything else could be said, the instructor came into the classroom and quieted down the students. Hello students. Today we have something very special in store for you all. I assume all of you have seen the black box on my desk. Correct. This object is called a TV or television. Its purpose is to show recorded moving images through the black screen. This is a new development of which the Hokage imported from a neighboring village. The reason it is here is that today we are going to be showing you a fight between the Toad Sanin Jara-sama and a new ninja who wishes to join our ranks. What we hopefully want is to show you all what you can aspire to be in your ninja career with lots of determination and hard work. We should be receiving a signal soon. Until then, please talk quietly. With that, the instructor sat down at his desk and began to write some reports whilst waiting for the signal to the TV. Throughout the wait, all of the students were wondering who this new ninja could be. But Kasha had a feeling that she knew who this new ninja was. I finally get to see what Naruto and I can do. I bet he's super strong. Dato, I shouldn't use that anymore. That's Aniki's saying Dato. Dato, Databane. It means the same, but I feel like I prefer Databane more. Suddenly, the TV turned on and the training field in which Naruto was at appeared on the screen. It was showing the beginning of the fight as Naruto and the Sonin charge at each other. Throughout the first half of the match, Kasha was a rook at her Aniki's skill. He was able to stand up to a Sonin, a freaking Sonin. A happy smile broke out onto Kasha's face as she saw Naruto land from the shoulder flip from the Sonin and charge at him again. His speed was so fast that she couldn't even see him move. However, she couldn't stop the face palm that she did when she saw Naruto headbutt the Sonin. Did he not notice that he's wearing a head protector? She saw the Sonin hold his head in pain whilst Naruto simply looked sheepish. Is his head made of steel? What the hell? Kasha felt someone her arm. She turned to see Makoto giving her a curious stare. That's your new Aniki. How strong is he? Kasha just shrugged. She had no idea herself how strong Nar was as he had been very vague with his answer on the way to the academy. With that, she glued her eyes back onto the TV. She didn't want to miss a single thing. Nar Aniki is so awesome. He's also a fellow ramen lover. Even better, with everyone so glued to the screen, no one saw a certain blonde-haired boy scowling harshly at the glowing figure on the screen. I'll show you, he thought in anger. This is a line break. Nar had just let Jiraiya recover from the vicious head, but that he had delivered. He wasn't going to attack during this because this was a simple test and therefore shouldn't be taken as life and death depended on it. Haha, I like you, kid. I bet you and Minato Gaki would get along really well. Remind me to introduce you to him later. Nar nodded, slightly excited to be formally introduced to his late father, Minato Namikaze. Without warning, Jiraiya went through some hand seals in quick succession. Nar prepared himself. Kaden Goku no Jutsu. Great fireball technique. And with that, a huge fireball shot from the Sonin's mouth, heading straight for Nar. Nar grinned. He knew that he was going to be considered a show-off for what he was going to do, but he didn't care. He had a certain someone to impress. Nar charged towards the fireball and jumped at it. At the last second, before the fire touched him, Nar went at his full speed and seemingly disappeared for a split second from everyone's view. In that split second, Nar appeared on the other side of the fireball as it continued forward and exploded a few trees behind him. The Hokage quickly got rid of the fire before it could spread. However, before Jiraiya could understand how Naruto seemingly went through the fireball, the glowing ninja moved in front of Jiraiya and aimed his fist at Jiraiya's face. Nar was slightly surprised when the sun managed to grab Naruto's fist just inches from his face. Jiraiya smirked. You're something else, kid. I can't believe you said we'd be disappointed. You're about as strong as a mid-level Jonin right now. Nar thought being considered a mid-level Junin would be a vast underestimation, but to him, it was. Nar simply smirked back at his late sensei and grabbed the fist that Jiraiya had sent his way in retaliation to Naruto's attempt. This made it so that the pair were in a physical deadlock. Before either could make any other movement, Naruto jumped up and kicked his legs out onto Jiraiya's chest. This caused the Sonin's grip to loosen, which made Nar jump away as he kicked out. Once again, a move that most normal shinobi wouldn't think of. Naruto landed safely whilst the Sonin stumbled backwards holding his chest in pain. You okay there, Jiraiya-san? Jiraiya grumbled as he charged forward. He was done holding back. He arrived in front of Nar and attempted to kick the glowing ninja's feet from under him. Nar wasn't having any of it though, and he hopped over the kick and responded by bringing his leg down from the hop straight onto Jiraiya's head. The Toad Sonin stepped back and punched forward. Halt. Jiraiya stopped with his fist an inch away from Naruto's face, which he was very glad as he hadn't recovered fully from the missed snap kick he attempted on his opponent. At the same time, the recording equipment was disabled as the test was over. The Hokage walked over to the two combatants with a kind smile on his face. That was amazing, Naruto. I can see how you managed to save Kasha-chan with that kind of speed and strength. Although I did notice that you didn't seem to utilize any kind of jutsu or genjutsu. Why is that? Nar scratched his head in embarrassment. Well, I kind of can't use genjutsu. My chakra reserve is so large that I can't possibly focus my chakra for delicate things such as that. And my jutsu are either a rank or above a rank, and I'd rather not show them, to be honest. Don't want to reveal all of my tricks. The Hokage nodded. He had to respect Naruto's wishes, and he came to join them and saved a fellow shinobi, so he'd respect Naruto's wishes. That is respectable, and I will allow this, Nar, for the skill and ability you have shown me in this test. I am happy to give you the rank of Special Jun. I would rank you at regular Jun, but since you can't use genjutsu and your jutsu are specifically above a rank, I believe this rank is appropriate due to your specialization in speed and unique fighting style. What do you think, Jiraiyakin? The Toad Sannin quickly looked over Naruto once more and beamed at him. This kid has scary speed, and that fighting style sure is a surprise. I can even tell that his potential is so much more. I'd even say that he is high-end Junin level now. Nar beamed proudly and snickered on the inside. I wonder what their response would be if I told them that what I used was only using half of my full power of my current power. And in my universe where I had Kurama's backup power, it would be about 10% of my power. Man, I've lost so much of my power since coming here. Naruto was brought back when he was presented with a head protector with the Kona leaf emblazoned on the metal slab on the headband. Thank you, Hokage-sama. The Hokage inclined his head in acceptance as he turned to his pupil. Jiraiya, thank you very much for agreeing to this test. I am grateful. It's all good, sensei. In fact, I'd like to get to know the kid a little better. He's quite the character. The kind old Hokage nodded as he turned back to his new shinobi. Well, you will be given a week to settle in, and then you will start to receive missions. Most of your missions will be with a full team of 4 or 3 for a few months before single missions will be given. Report to my office in 1 week, in which your first mission will be assigned. Congratulations and good luck, Naruto_. Nar nodded as the Hokage vanished along with Jiraiya. Naruto smiled brightly to no one in particular as he walked in the air. He was in the Konoha shinobi again. Quickly tying the head protector around his forehead like he used to. Just like all of his clothes, the headband lit up in a golden fire and the loose ends of the band floated upwards just like his hair due to the form he was in. He didn't care though. He was a Konoha ninja again. He felt complete now. He didn't feel any more due to not having the band around his forehead. Not letting this go again. I miss my original one, but this one will suffice. I can't wait to show Kusha, but I still have a few more hours before her lessons end. I better make sure that my idea of where to get ramen is still there. With that thought, Naruto vanished in a flash of golden light in the process of checking what he wanted to check out. This is a line break. 3 hours later, the academy had ended and all of the kids were leaving out the front gate of the academy. Kusha stood at the gate and waved goodbye to her friends that she had. She even waved to Minato, who smiled happily as he traveled on his way. Kusha looked around for a while wondering where Naruto was. Where is he? He said he'd come to pick me up. Come on, Aniki. Kosa began to frantically looking around until a pair of hands covered her eyes in surprise. She briefly became scared until she began to feel incredibly calm. And because of this, she smiled happily. Naruto and Aniki quickly turning around in Naruto's grip. Kusha hugged Naruto around the middle in happiness. She felt Naruto's arms wrap around her and she giggled inside. Whoa, I guess you must have missed me. Kusha moved back from his hug and smiled brightly at him. Noticing the headband, she gasped and started to jump in place due to excitement. Naruto laughed as he watched Kusha jump in place. You passed. Yes, I did. I gained the rank of Special Jun. Naruto stated proudly, pointing his thumb at his new headband. Spion, that's so cool. I know, right? Now, how about I tell you everything about what happened over some wonderful ramen? Kusha's eyes lit up like fire as she nodded excitedly. Well, then follow me, Kushi-chan. With that, Naruto reached his hand out and smiled kindly when Kusha grabbed his hand in return. Where are we going? Kusha asked as they strolled together away from the academy. Well, after I passed my test, I wandered around for a place to eat ramen, and I came across this brand new ramen stand called Ikyaku's. It's run by this kind old man with a mustache called Kaisa and his young son, Tuki, and they make the best ramen in the world. Trust me. With that, the pair continued onwards, hand in hand. I think I can do this. I actually think can fix everything that went wrong in my universe. I need to do for the sake of my friends to be born. So guys, what do you think about this Naruto story? Tell me your opinion in the comments. And if you want more Naruto What If stories, make sure to subscribe to Universe of Naruto. Thanks for watching.